Welcome to another custom-tailored deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We've got a lot to get through.
We really do. And our mission on this show is always the exact same. We take a stack of sources, or in today's case, one very detailed source. We distill the most important nuggets of knowledge, and we present them to you so you can walk away feeling incredibly well-informed.
Right.
Today, we are unpacking a staggering, just rapid geopolitical escalation in the Middle East. And we're going to be using a highly detailed post from the Geopolitics and Economy collection of the KULT Patreon page. That's our sole map for this entire discussion.
But before we jump in, we need to explicitly address you, the listener, regarding the nature of what we are about to unpack.
Yeah, this is important.
Today's material contains highly sensitive, heavily politically charged content. I mean, we're looking at direct statements and military actions from U.S., Israeli, and Iranian leadership during an ongoing, deeply volatile conflict.
Because of that intensity, we must firmly state right at the top that we are entirely impartial in this deep dive. We are taking absolutely no sides. We are endorsing no viewpoints, whether they originate from the political left, the right, or any international actor involved.
Exactly. Our mission today is purely to neutrally convey, decode, and analyze the claims and the ideas exactly as they are presented in the text.
Right. We are simply here to serve as your guides through some incredibly complex terrain. Our goal is giving you the clarity you need to grasp the sheer scale of the information, not telling you what to think about it.
So with that said, we should probably start with the big picture.
Let's get right into that big picture overview. As we sit here, we're looking at a conflict that is currently in its fifth day. It was triggered by We are talking about the death of Iran's supreme leader on the very first day, the absolute collapse of backdoor diplomacy, and now a severe retaliatory threat against Israel's nuclear infrastructure. The velocity of these events is something we really need to wrap our heads around.
The speed and the scale are definitely the defining characteristics here.
Yeah.
Going from diplomatic negotiations to a decapitation strike in a matter of days completely rewrites the regional security dynamic that you might have been familiar with just a week ago.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the most pressing threat that the KULT post highlights.
All right, the Dimona threat.
Exactly. According to a warning issued on Wednesday by an Iranian military official, Iran is explicitly threatening to attack Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor, along with regional energy infrastructure.
And the condition attached to that threat is crucial.
It really is. They say they will execute this attack if the U.S. and Israel continue pursuing regime change in Tehran. This marks a massive escalation in rhetoric for a conflict that, again, is only entering its fifth day.
To really understand the gravity of that threat, you have to look at what Dimona represents.
Walk us through that.
Well, they're referring to the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center. This sits deep in the Negev desert. And the critical piece of context for you here is that Dimona is the heart of Israel's undeclared nuclear program.
Wow.
So by labeling it a legitimate target in the event of an attempt to overthrow the Islamic Republic, Iran is putting the ultimate geopolitical wildcard on the table. It shifts the entire nature of the engagement.
And the timeline backing this up is just staggering. This current conflict began just days ago, on February 28th. That's when the U.S. and Israel launched a joint military campaign. And Washington gave this campaign a very specific, intense name.
Operation Epic Fury.
Right, Operation Epic Fury. Just the name alone tells you we're not looking at a limited surgical skirmish.
Not at all. And the casualty figures confirm the absolute scale of Operation Epic Fury. The text details a genuinely shocking reality.
Yeah, this part is heavy.
On the very first day of this operation, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with dozens of senior officials, were killed.
Day one.
Day one. In military terms, executing a massive decapitation strike aimed at the absolute highest levels of the state's leadership structure right out of the gate is designed to induce total paralysis.
It fundamentally changes the equation before anyone even has time to react, and the human toll extends far beyond that inner circle.
It does.
According to Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency, these attacks have already claimed more than 1,000 Iranian lives. Over 1,000 lives in just a few days. The intensity of the artillery fire being exchanged across the region right now is immense.
And returning to that threat against the Dimona complex, it is vital for you to realize that this isn't just empty posturing for the cameras.
No, there's a history here.
There's a documented track record. Iran has already fired dozens of ballistic missiles at the Dimona facility during the early days of this very conflict.
Right.
And if we look back, They previously attacked Dimona during a 12-day war between Israel and Iran in June 2015.
Oh, wow.
So the willingness to target this specific, highly sensitive nuclear site has been demonstrated repeatedly. It's an established tactical option for them.
That is a terrifying thought when you consider the potential environmental and human catastrophe of a compromised nuclear facility.
Absolutely.
But there is a surprising, somewhat reassuring note provided in the text regarding the nuclear risk, at least on the Iranian side of the equation.
Right, from the IAEA.
Exactly. According to a Wednesday report from the IAEA, despite this incredibly heavy exchange of bombings, the facilities housing nuclear material inside Iran remain undamaged. As of that report, the IAEA states there is no current radiation risk.
That offers a small sigh of relief in an otherwise escalating situation.
Definitely.
It indicates that, at least so far, the physical bombings within Iran haven't breached the containment of nuclear materials. But as the conflict expands and the rhetoric heats up, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. You really have to wonder how long those guardrails can hold when the stated goals of the combatants are so absolute.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We need to look at the timeline just prior to February 28. Because if you were following the diplomatic channels before this erupted, you have to be experiencing severe whiplash right now.
Oh, without a doubt.
How did the situation deteriorate from the negotiating table to a massive coordinated military campaign like Operation Epic Fury so incredibly fast?
The background provided on February's diplomatic efforts gives us a fascinating look behind the curtain. The U.S. and Iran were not completely isolated from one another.
They were actually talking.
Yes. They held 3 rounds of indirect talks, which were facilitated through Omani mediators. And what is crucial for you to note here is that all sides were indicating progress right before the military campaign launched.
That is wild.
There was active, functioning backdoor diplomacy that seemed to be moving in a positive direction.
Which makes the sudden launch of a decapitation strike all the more jarring. And Iran's perspective on how and why that breakdown occurred is explicitly detailed for us in the source.
Right, from the foreign minister.
Yes, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi actually took to X, formerly Twitter, to level a very direct accusation. He accused U.S. President Donald Trump of deliberately sabotaging the negotiations just days before the bombs started falling.
And the specific language Araqi uses gives you a window into the Iranian perception of this diplomatic failure. It's not just a complaint about policy, it's framed as a fundamental betrayal of the process.
Araqi's wording is just fascinating. Let me read it. He compared the nuclear talks to a real estate deal.
Right.
He wrote, "When complex nuclear negotiations are treated like a real estate transaction, and when big lies obscure realities, unrealistic expectations can never be met."
That's a strong statement.
It gets stronger. He followed that up with a sharp accusation, stating that the result was, quote, bombing the negotiating table out of spite. Yeah, he essentially claimed that Trump betrayed both diplomacy and the American voters.
What's fascinating here is the stark, almost incomprehensible contrast between the diplomatic progress happening in Oman and the sudden reality of a military decapitation strike.
It really is day and night.
It highlights for you exactly how quickly geopolitical guardrails can just evaporate. One moment, mediators are making tangible progress on complex nuclear negotiations, and the next, the negotiating table is bombed out of spite, to use Araqi's framing.
Yeah.
In high-stakes geopolitics, backdoor progress means absolutely nothing once a strategic military decision is executed. The pivot from diplomacy to total war was practically instantaneous.
So what does this all mean? We have a destroyed diplomatic channel, a massive military operation, the death of a supreme leader, and active threats against nuclear sites.
It's a lot to process.
It is. When you put Araqi's accusations next to that sudden decapitation strike, a glaring question emerges. What is the actual endgame here? Looking at the statements from Washington and Tel Aviv, they aren't hiding it. The explicit, stated goal from both U.S. and Israeli leaders is regime change in Tehran.
The rhetoric of an uprising is being heavily deployed by Allied leadership across the board right now.
How so?
They are framing Operation Epic Fury not just as a punitive military strike, but as a direct catalyst for internal revolution within Iran.
Okay.
They are operating under the assumption that intense military pressure will fracture the state and empower the citizenry to topple the government.
Let me share the direct quotes from the leadership to show you exactly how coordinated this messaging is. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu openly urged the Iranian people to, quote, take to the streets, rise up by the millions.
Right.
In a similar vein, President Donald Trump told Iranians to take control of their destiny.
Yeah.
And perhaps the most definitive, uncompromising statement came from U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who declared on Wednesday that the Iranian regime, quote, is finished and they know it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see a massive friction point between the political rhetoric being broadcast to the public and the ground-level intelligence happening behind closed doors.
Oh, this is the massive disconnect you were talking about earlier.
Exactly. The Allied political leadership is projecting immense confidence that the regime will fall, propelled by this civilian uprising.
But the intel says otherwise.
Yes. The text brings in a vital counter-perspective from the intelligence community that completely undercuts that optimism. According to a Reuters report, U.S. intelligence officials and the CIA are highly skeptical that a democratic regime change is actually likely to occur.
That is a massive disconnect. You have the defense secretary going on the record saying the regime is finished and the CIA waving a giant red flag saying, hold on, a democratic uprising is not the most probable outcome of this campaign?
Not at all. The CIA's assessment warns of a very different, much darker scenario. Their analysis suggests that rather than Iranian civilians rising up to seize control and form a democracy, the decapitation of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei might simply create a massive power vacuum.
And vacuums always get filled.
Always. And the group most likely to rush in and fill that vacuum are the hardliners within the IRGC. That's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Right.
So instead of a democratic transition, you could see a hardened, radicalized military faction replace Khamenei, taking total, undisputed control of the state apparatus.
And the IRGC is certainly not backing down in the face of Operation Epic Fury. In fact, they seem to be leaning into the escalation.
They are.
The danger of this hardliner takeover is underscored by a declaration made by the IRGC on that same Wednesday. They stated that they are prepared for, quote, the complete destruction of the region's military and economic infrastructure.
Complete destruction.
Yeah, they are matching the Allied escalation word for word, promising total regional devastation as the war shows absolutely no signs of abating.
To synthesize what all of this means for you, the listener, we are witnessing a profound and dangerous tension.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the political ambition of forcing a civilian uprising through overwhelming military pressure. On the other side, you have the intelligence reality, which suggests that this pressure is merely entrenching a furious, heavily armed military junta.
It's a terrifying gamble.
It is. Because of this gap between ambition and reality, the entire global energy market and the broader security of the Middle East are hanging by a thread.
Wow.
If the IRGC acts on its threat to destroy regional economic infrastructure, or if they successfully land a devastating strike on Dimona, the ripple effects will be felt in every single corner of the globe.
It is an incredibly dense, fast-moving situation. To briefly recap what we've pulled from the Patreon post for you today, we've traced the whiplash pivot from promising indirect diplomacy in Oman straight into the devastating launch of Operation Epic Fury.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We've looked at the massive scale of the casualties, most notably the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and dozens of top officials on day one. We've examined the terrifying retaliatory threats directed at Israel's Dimona nuclear complex and the surrounding regional energy grids.
Right.
And finally, we unpacked the highly volatile push for regime change, contrasting the optimistic calls for civilian uprising from U.S. and Israeli leaders against the stark warnings from the CIA about the inevitable rise of IRGC hardliners.
This raises an important question, something for you to continue thinking about long after we wrap up today.
I love leaving everyone with something to mull over.
If the strategic goal of a massive decapitation strike like Operation Epic Fury is to neutralize a state threat and encourage civilian liberation, but the on-the-ground intelligence suggests it only elevates a hardened military faction that now feels it has absolutely nothing left to lose. Does forcing regime change actually make the world safer? Or does it permanently remove the very people you needed sitting across from you at the negotiating table?
That is the exact kind of critical thinking we hope to inspire. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We deeply appreciate your curiosity and your commitment to understanding the complex layers behind these massive global events. Keep questioning, keep looking beneath the surface of the headlines, and we will be right here to help you unpack the next stack of sources. Take care.